Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this session with Commissioner Mingus Mapps. My name is Forrest Romig. The Engaging Minds Committee here at Holiday Park Plaza is sponsoring today's session. We offer a warm welcome to the residents of Mirabella, Portland, who are joining us today. The Commissioner will talk for a while, and then our live audience will have an opportunity to ask questions of him. First, though, it's my great pleasure to introduce Glennis Lundberg, Chair of Engaging Minds. Glennis?
Good morning and welcome to Engaging Minds. And I wish at this time to thank Forrest for being the Zoom tech and making this possible for us. Commissioner Mingus Mapps is our speaker today. He fell in love with the Pacific Northwest during his many visits to this area from his home in California. After graduating from Reed College with a degree in political science, he went to work in Commissioner Gladys McCoy's office, and it was under the mentorship of Beverly Stein that he actualized himself as a civil servant. He took office as commissioner in Portland in January 2021. He oversees the Water Bureau, the Bureau of Environmental Services, and the Bureau of Emergency Communications. He is liaison to Travel Portland, the Visitors Development Fund, and the Fair and Moral Claims Board. It is clear with all these responsibilities that we are fortunate that he is taking the time to update us on the many issues facing the city of Portland today. Please welcome Commissioner Mingus Mapps.
Well, thank you, Glennis. Thank you, Forrest, and thank everyone who has come out this afternoon. I see some familiar faces and some familiar names here. It's really great to see some old friends on this call. And I also want to thank the new faces in this room too. I'm really delighted to have this hour to share with you. I thought today we would just start out by me giving a quick overview of what I have been doing on council for the past 10 months or so. And then I hope that we can open this up to a broader conversation. I'd love to take your questions and hear your feedback and just have a dialogue. Of course, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mingus Mapps. I'm one of your new commissioners on Portland City Council. As of today, I think I've been on council for about 10 months and 11 days, and it has certainly been a remarkable journey. As you've heard, I'm the commissioner in charge of the Water Bureau, the Bureau of Environmental Services, which probably a lot of you think of as the Sewer Bureau, but we do a lot more than that. And I'm the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Emergency Communications, which is 911 for the most part. Now, if you have a problem with any of those services, water, environmental services, 911, ultimately the buck stops with me. So if you have any specific questions about those programs and bureaus, I'd love to engage in that with you. But I also have responsibilities which transcend the specific bureaus that I manage. And I suspect that a lot of you care about some of those issues. So I thought I'd talk about 3 challenges that transcend my bureaus, but I'm really focused on. And those challenges are public safety, homelessness, and livability. I think these, when I come to forums like this, those are the issues I consistently hear Portlanders talk about. And when I hear about those issues, because we face huge challenges on all 3 topics, but I hope today that I also have some good news for you. I think that the city in the past 10 months has made important strides on public safety, houselessness, and livability, and I want to let you know what we're doing and where we hope to go on those issues. First, let me start out by talking about public safety. I know that this is typically the top concern for most Portlanders. And it's one of my top concerns too. My goal here is to build a better public safety system. I think our public safety system needs to make Portlanders safer. And I also think that our public safety system needs to police more fairly. And I think we can get there. We've made some important strides on those topics. But first, let me put this into context for you. And I suspect a lot of you have been around Portland for a while. So none of this will come as news to you. But it is remarkable to reflect on how much our world has changed and how quickly it has changed. For example, just 5 years ago in 2016, Portland saw 16 homicides, 16. On the other hand, as of today, Portland has suffered more than 67 homicides, which makes 2021 the deadliest year in our city's 170-year-long history. That outcome and those numbers are just unacceptable. That's why I've challenged council to focus on the goal of reducing homicide in our city by 20% in the next 15 months. That's an ambitious goal, but I think we can get there, and we've actually taken some steps that bring us closer to that. For example, since I've been on council, we've increased the budget for police officers, so we actually have more cops out on the street. We've done that through some hiring, and we've also reorganized the police department, so we have fewer officers behind desk, and we've gotten them out in the streets and in their squad cars actually responding to 911 calls. Something else that we've done that is specifically focused on gun violence is a new police unit that we've created since I've been on council. This police unit focuses specifically on gun crimes after shots have been fired. So we're much better at responding to those situations, getting investigators out there on the streets, and working with the DA. We typically have the DA, the FBI, and police officers all out there anytime you see a shooting. That has been helped us actually close out some of these crimes. But there's obviously a lot more work to be done. And one of the things that you will see in the coming weeks is we're about to launch yet another new police unit. It's going to be called the FIT team. And the FIT team is a police unit which specifically focuses on gun crimes before the trigger gets pulled. You know, right now we're doing a good job of investigating shootings after they happen, but clearly one of the things we want to do is to make sure that we see fewer shootings in the first place, and that will be the purview of the FIT team. They'll work with communities that are involved in gun violence and really try to intervene before we have a crisis like we tend to see every night. Indeed, I was heartbroken to see that literally out in Gresham today, I think at 184th and Division, we had a young person who was shot outside a high school, fled into a high school for aid. That's outside of our city limits, but it certainly is part of our community. And we've also made significant investments in violence prevention programs. That's one of the first things that I did once I got on council, was to partner with the rest of council to invest about $4 million into programs that work with youth and violence impacted families to help them step off that path that leads to gun violence. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, but we are making progress. I think that it's also important that we reinvent policing so that it is fairer. And as a person of color and the single dad of 2 young brown children, this is something which is extremely important to me. So since I've been on council, we've been working hard to set up a new system of citizen-led police oversight. So we, the people of Portland, can hold our police accountable for the work they do. I spend an awful lot of time every week meeting with labor negotiators and our police union to negotiate our new police contract. It's in that contract where we'll sort out issues around things like body cams for police officers. That's something which I very much believe we need to do. Indeed, one of the things you'll see me do over the course of the next several weeks is to call on council to rehire some of our recently retired police officers, and I want to get that done. And in addition to that, I want to make sure that every new police officer that we add to the Bureau has a body cam on his or her shoulder. And speaking of accountability measures, one of the other things which I think is really important is the work that we're doing with the Federal Department of Justice, which is partnering with us to make sure that the Police Bureau adheres to the best practices. And it's certainly my goal that we have the best trained and best equipped police force in the Pacific Northwest. And I think that we're well on our way to achieving that. Although I will also tell you that our Police Bureau is too small. For a city our size, you'd expect our police force to have a staff of about 1,200 people. As of today, we have fewer than 700 officers over at the PPB, and we need to turn that around. But as we turn that around, we also, I think, need to reinvent policing to a significant degree. That's why I was really proud to partner with my colleagues to sponsor Portland Street Response. We have some great news there, and this will help me transition into my second topic, which is houselessness. Probably the headline news for houselessness, and I think we might have done this last week or the week before, is the council has committed to expanding Portland Street Response citywide. For those of you on the east side, you should expect Portland Street Response in your neighborhoods within the next year or so. We're going to basically expand to the entire East Precinct in the coming months. And we'll also have a pilot project downtown, and we'll get out to the Mirabella eventually. For those of you who don't know what Portland Street Response is, let me give you a little bit of background on this program. I'm the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Emergency Communications. So my teams over at 911 are the first responders who basically send out police or fire or ambulances to 911 calls when they come in. We get about 1 million calls a year. And I'll tell you, about half of those involve someone who is houseless or undergoing some sort of mental health crisis. And typically what we do in those situations is we wound up sending out a cop to respond to a situation where someone is on the streets and having some sort of mental health crisis. Frankly, that's not, cops are not good tools for that particular problem. It's a little bit like sending out a Marine to solve poverty or mental illness. And that's where Portland Street Response comes in. Portland Street Response is housed in the fire department. These folks are medical providers, mental health workers, folks who are trained in crisis de-escalation. So what is happening now out in the Lentz neighborhood and soon happening on the east side and soon after that will be happening citywide is that instead of sending out a cop to respond to a mentally ill person on the streets acting out, we'll send out Portland Street Response. They'll go and help, instead of, when a cop arrives there, typically they tell the houseless person to move along, or maybe they might take that person downtown to jail. But Portland Street Response does something different. They try to diagnose, what that person's problem is and connect that person to the services they need in order to get healthier. I think that's much better service to, our neighbors who are suffering from houselessness and mental illness. And frankly, it also frees up our police officers to focus in on crime. So those are some of the reasons why we're really excited about it. And it's a change that you will see coming to your neighborhoods very soon. In addition to that, since I've been on council, I think we've doubled our investments in houseless services. So we're doing a big surge here. I know it feels and looks bad out there. And one of the things that has happened over the past 18 months is during COVID, the city basically got out of the business of doing basic maintenance to the city and also intervening and asking houseless camps to break up. So that's why you can see people put tents on sidewalks and the tent can just stay there for a year or so. That dynamic is beginning to change, and it's beginning to change because of some of the investments that we've made. At this point, we're investing about $150 million a year between us and the county in trying to serve our houseless community. If you read the headlines, you might have also heard that Commissioner Ryan is in the process of standing up 6 new safe rest villages. These are essentially organized houseless camps that are sponsored by the city and the county. This will provide houseless people with a safe place to go, which is not a sidewalk. These safe rest villages are not intended to be a permanent home for people, but rather our goal here is to help get people off the sidewalk, get them in a stable place, and then begin to connect them to the services they need in order to grow healthier and eventually move them into stable, secure housing. So we're starting to see some progress there. Commissioner Ryan announced some of those camps in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I know that he will announce other camps in the coming months too. In addition to that, some of the things that council has done on the homelessness issue since I've been here is to make it much easier for nonprofit groups to set up houseless shelters. Essentially, what we tried to do is cut through the red tape that nonprofits have to navigate when they try to set up a shelter or a safe place for people to park their cars, maybe in a church parking lot on a weekday. Historically, that has been a nightmarishly bureaucratic process, but we've managed to cut down the red tape there, and we're starting to see more groups move into that area. So with that, I hope that we've grown our capacity to serve our houseless community. And in addition to those, I think important steps that specifically are designed to help our houseless community stabilize, we've also set up some new rules and defined some spaces where houseless folks are not allowed to camp. As I mentioned before, because of COVID, the city largely halted its efforts to move camps that are placed in an inappropriate space. One of our concerns was moving people around during an age of COVID and helping that dreaded virus spread more quickly. Thank goodness we finally at this point have a vaccine. And so we're able to kind of move into this post-COVID era. One of the things that we've done, and we're kind of adjusting to that, and we're beginning to draw some boundaries. So we've passed new ordinances that define spaces where people aren't allowed to camp. For example, people are no longer officially allowed to camp adjacent to a school, a hospital, or within 10 feet of the entrance of a business. Those are the rules now. I fully recognize the city hasn't done enough to actually enforce those rules, but that's our next step. We had about a 2-year period where we weren't trying to police this at all. And now we're in an era where we've actually set up some expectations and boundaries, and we're starting to enforce those boundaries again. And I think especially those of you who have gotten around the city a little bit in the last several months, you might have even noticed that some of our larger camps have started to dissipate. And something which I think is important and often gets lost there is that people say, if you sweep a camp, you're just moving the problem to a different corner. And there's some truth to that, but we're awfully mindful about how we do interventions in camps. One of the reasons why it takes so long is we typically do weeks, sometimes even months of outreach to folks who are living in houseless camps in parks and in wetlands and even in parking lots to try to connect them to services. What we consistently find is that about half the folks who we ask to move along, especially when we do our intervention, are able to and choose to actually take advantage of city and county services. So they actually move into stabilized, stable living situations and begin to access human services that begin to help them heal. It doesn't solve everyone's problem, but it begins to actually move us in the right direction. And the third issue I'd like to highlight for you before we get into our Q&A is livability. And here I'm talking about issues like trash and graffiti. Again, this story looks an awful lot like our houselessness story, where for about 2 years, because of COVID, the city got out of the business of just doing basic maintenance that we need to have a city that we can be proud of, a city that you feel comfortable navigating. This is particularly important to me. In Glyndis's introduction, you might have heard that I'm the liaison to Travel Portland. And so part of my mission is to make Portland a appealing city for visitors. And frankly, right now, our downtown is world famous for being unlivable. You know, part of my job is to attract conventions to the city. And I'll tell you, I do a lot of hard meetings every week, but one of the hardest meetings is to, you know, meet with a convention planner from someplace other than Oregon and try to make the case for why you should invite, you know, 10,000 engineers to Portland for a long weekend for their convention. You know, they see the headlines in the news and they choose not to visit us. And that's a dynamic that we have to turn around. But I do think there's some good news here. We've made some enormous investments in getting the trash picked up and painting over the graffiti. And we're starting to see some real change out there. A question everyone asks me is, you know, how long is it going to take to fix these problems, whether it's reforming the police or solving homelessness or solving litter and livability issues. And here, you know, I think I have some good news for the short term. Our livability crisis really grew out of control because we weren't doing basic maintenance. We were not picking up the trash and the litter. We've begun to do that through some partnerships. And I think a year from now, basically at the end of 2022, we'll be able to pick up, get back to where we were pre-COVID in terms of cleanliness in the city and graffiti in the city, which wasn't perfect, but certainly is a heck of a lot better than what we've done so far. And we're going to get there through a couple of different initiatives, which I think are particularly important. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed or heard of Solve, which is a community group that has come together to pick up litter throughout the city. We've partnered with them to organize more than 26 cleanups throughout the city. So far this year, I believe we've collected more than 14,000 pounds of litter through Solve. So we're awfully proud of that, and we're going to keep doing it until we get to every neighborhood in the city. We've also added new funds to clean up houseless camps. So far, we added, I think, $1.2 million specifically focused on getting the litter surrounding houseless camps cleaned up. So significant progress there. Also, we've created a new contract specifically for about $300,000 to basically to pay houseless folks to go up and to, you know, provide them with work, and that work is to pick up litter that is in the communities that they live in. We're really proud of that. You know, one of the things we want to do is to both provide opportunities for people, especially people living on the streets, and this is a win-win. So we're starting to see that turn around. And we've made some really significant investments in graffiti removal. Since I've been here, we've invested a new $3.4 million in graffiti removal. So you're starting to see some of those tags come down off the streets. And I think that's awfully important too. You know, those tags are in many cases a message that this is not a safe place. And one of the things that we really got to do is reclaim our streets. And the other livability thing that I'd really highlight, and something I'm really proud of, is we've, I think about 2 weeks ago, we renewed the Clean and Safe contract downtown. And for those of you who spend time downtown, especially early in the morning, Clean and Safe are those folks that you see maybe on bicycles who are emptying garbage cans or spraying graffiti off the walls of downtown businesses early in the morning. That's Clean and Safe. I think last year they removed more than 73,000 bags of trash from downtown streets. They also picked up about 47,000 needles, about the same number of biohazards, which is human excrement, just to tell you the truth. And they also removed about 41,000 graffiti tags from downtown buildings. That's awfully important in terms of stabilizing and maintaining the quality of life downtown. You know, this is a situation where the tin, what it says on the tin is a pretty good description. The point of that program is to keep downtown clean and safe, and they make an enormous contribution to that. And I'm proud to say that they will be around doing their good work for years to come. And also a great thing about this clean and safe contract is, in addition to the basic services they provide around graffiti removal, trash removal, we are adding 3 new mental health outreach workers who are going to be part of the clean and safe team, who will specifically work with the houseless community and the mentally ill folks you sometimes encounter downtown, specifically with the goal of connecting them with services so that they can begin to stabilize and get off the streets. And I could go on like that for a while, but I'm sure at this point you're tired of hearing my voice, and I'm sure I can tell from some of the action in the chats that we've begun to inspire some questions. So why don't I be quiet for a while and change the dynamics here? I'd love to take your questions or take your feedback and open up a dialogue.
So I took the spotlight off the commissioner. If you want to see everybody, you'll need to change to gallery view. And we have Barbara Gaines has a question. How does our current city organization positively influence or hinder progress on the 3 initiatives you have addressed?
Oh, I'm guessing that's a charter reform question, and I'm glad that it came up. Our form of government is an absolute hindrance to achieving public safety, resolving homelessness, and keeping the city clean. And for those of you who are relatively new to Portland or don't pay a lot of attention to local politics, there's something that you need to know about Portland because it will explain how we got here. Portland has a unique form of government, a commission form of government. So in my introduction, you heard that I'm the commissioner in charge of the Water Bureau, the commissioner in charge of environmental services, and the commissioner in charge of BOIC 911. And what the commission form of government means is that everyone on council is basically in charge of a handful of city bureaus. So you heard my bureaus. Commissioner Hardesty, on the other hand, is the person in charge of the Fire Bureau and the Office of Civic Life. The mayor is in charge of the Police Bureau. Dan Ryan has the Housing Bureau. And that dynamic is unique to Portland. This is a form of government that was popular in the early 1900s, and even then it was kind of an obscure, kind of wonky thing, was never widely used in the United States. Today, Portland is the last city of its size to use a commission form of government, and here's why. You know, most people probably think that Portland has 1 mayor and 4 members of city council. But that's actually not what we have. Portland has 5 mayors, each with his or her own fiefdom. And frankly, if these mayors do not work well together, we don't make progress. And that very much explains why Portland looks the way it does today. You know, if you're confronted with a social challenge, which is a little bit complex, our form of government is designed to set us up for failure. And, you know, here's an example. We've talked about houselessness. And at first glance, you might think, well, houselessness is just a housing issue. If you build houses, the rest of it will be fixed. But we know it's more complex than that, you know. Houselessness is, you know, it's a housing issue. It's often a mental health issue. It's definitely a public safety issue too. If you're camping in a park, it's a parks issue. And if you're camping on the sidewalk, it's actually a PBOT issue. So if you want to have a comprehensive, effective houselessness strategy, you have to get all of those bureaus working together. And one of the things that our form of government does is it makes sure that we do not work together. You know, some of you might have watched the headlines and stories about trying to do something about the camps in Laurelhurst Park. And one of the reasons why those camps persisted for so long is, you know, you had to get, the camps were in a park. Some of those tents were on sidewalks, and sidewalks are handled by PBOT, the Department of Transportation. And obviously you had to deal with houselessness issues and public safety issues. So you had to get about 4 different commissioners on the same page with the same plan in order to intervene there. And it took dozens of meetings and many months to actually achieve that. If you go by Laurel Horse today, it's much better than, it's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. And that's one example of how we got to where we are today. But I also have some good news here. Every 10 years, Portland goes through a process of evaluating our city charter. Our city charter is essentially the constitution for the city of Portland. And it describes things like the commission form of government. And if you want to move beyond the commission form of government, the way to do it is to change the charter. We have a citizens group, which has been meeting for about the last 10 months. To evaluate the charter and come up with some recommendations. That group is completely independent from council. Council appoints people to the commission, but after that, they go off and do their own work. They've been meeting diligently. They meet monthly. Usually they have several meetings a month. They're collecting ideas. One of the things that I expect them to do is to come up with a set of recommendations for how we can change our form of government. In fact, they've told me that they will have a plan ready for the voters that will be on your ballot in November of 2022. So we're about a year away from a vote, which will give us an opportunity to choose a different form of government. And it can look, that form of government can come in many different ways. Most cities have a strong mayor where most people kind of expect the mayor to have the power to change things. It's actually not true in Portland, but that's an option that we can go in. Other cities have a city manager. So you have a professional in public administration who basically is responsible for managing the day-to-day responsibilities for different city bureaus. I will tell you, frankly, it's a little bit crazy that I'm the guy in charge of the water bureau. That's $1 billion bureau. We can deliver 100 million gallons of water today, but I have a PhD in political science, but I will tell you, I'm not a hydraulic engineer. This is new work for me. And there might be something unwise about intentionally putting people who are frankly unqualified, and I say this about myself, in these important policy-making decisions. So I think that changing our commission form of government and that vote that we will have on November 2022 is a really, certainly once in a decade opportunity. And I hope you'll pay attention to it. If I might suggest some programming for a future meeting, you might invite folks from the Charter Review Commission to come and speak to your group. They have public meetings. If you Google Charter Review Portland, they'll take you to their website. All of their meetings are online, so you can watch videos of what they're up to. You can submit testimony if you have a brilliant idea about how to make Portland city government better. They're literally in the process of collecting those ideas. And I'll tell you, the game is completely open. Like I pay a lot of attention to what they're doing. No one has a hidden agenda here. I don't think anyone has a secret form of government that they're pushing. I think they're just trying to get it right. And there's also distance from city council too. So, I'm pushing for change, but the nature of that change is really going to be up to the commission and the people of Portland.
Okay. Glennis, we have a couple questions we have one person raised their hand and we have a couple questions in chat. Which do you want to take first?
Why don't we do the one with the raised hand?
Okay, that's going to be, I think, Doug Ewell. You want to unmute?
Got it. Okay, a couple things. I really think the houseless problem, really is an emergency. We need to do something about it soon. And I think that we're kind of plodding along. I know we've got these 6 camps that are supposed to be happening sometime in the next several months. But that's still, once they get those camps, that's what, much less than 10% of the problem. We need to move much faster than that. And we ought to approach it like an emergency and say, we don't have time to go through and study every one of these things. We got to move and get this stuff going. And likewise for the trash around those people, around the camps, I think the city ought to buy 1,000 cans and then pay the rubbish people, often to come pick them up. And it's a matter of spending the money on it. But we also hear that the city is fortunate enough to be able to look forward to having more money than we're used to having. So I think we ought to move, faster.
Doug, I completely agree with you. You know, the human misery that we see on our streets is unacceptable, and also is holding back our recovery. So we're in a vicious cycle, frankly, heading down. We can't move fast enough. One of the challenges here is that with houselessness, trying to actually connect people to mental health services and housing, it's a complicated process that takes time. You know, we are, you know, every week in council, we're signing off on plans to build more affordable housing, more supportive housing. But I agree with you. One of the changes that I think that we need to make right away is to increase the capacity at our houseless shelters. Like, one of the reasons why things look so bad on the street right now is because of COVID. We basically cut the capacity in our houseless shelters by about half, so people could socially distance. So people got pressed out from, you know, our shelters to the streets. I think especially now that we have vaccines in many people's arms, we can increase the capacity. That's going to make a big difference right away. That's a change that we can make right away. And that'll help. The county is also standing up its more comprehensive houselessness services. So they've been doing an awful lot of planning about how they can reach out to those folks. I think we'll begin to see the impact that those dollars make there. And I 100% agree with you on the trash thing. I think that we should do a surge on getting trash off the streets. And there's some good news here. I think the mayor agrees with you and me on this, Doug. One of the things that the city council will do in the coming weeks is we do a budget adjustment at the end of the year, and that's the extra dollars that you're talking about. It's called the fall bump, where we can adjust our budgets before we get to July 1, which is when our fiscal year ends. I am going to propose a plan to put major new investments in picking up trash off the streets. You know, when I got here, they said we could get this cleaned up in 3 years. And one of the things I've been saying is 3 years is too long. I really want this to be the last 12 months that we see Portland look like this. And I think, frankly, we have the resources and the manpower out there right now to get that done. So on the trash, you're going to see major progress right away. On homelessness, you're going to see significant progress. But I will tell you, you know, people are out there on the streets for a reason. It's not just getting people inside, it's about getting them connected to mental health services. And that takes a lot of work. So I can't promise you that we'll solve homelessness in the next 12 months, but I think I can promise you that over the course of the next year, you'll see a significant improvement in camping in the city. And I think all the resources that we have coming together from the city, the county, even Metro is playing a role here. We are at the beginning of seeing that dynamic change where we actually begin to make progress on houselessness. And I think medium term, over the next several years, actually, it's going to look like a very different city, but a better city. You know, I think we've had 5 years where we've seen Portland get worse, especially on houselessness. I think we're at the point where we can begin to reasonably expect some improvements.
Good, thank you.
We have 7 in the chat room. Is that right?
Okay.
Yes, why don't we go ahead and get some of those?
Yeah,
Do you want me to read them?
Yeah, well, just,
One at a time.
yeah.
Okay, the first one, how much of the clean and safe contact fines with Portland Progress goes to fund other staff at Portland Progress who do not work on clean and safe tasks?
Actually, none. I suspect this is a question about the Portland Businesses Alliance's involvement with Clean and Safe. For those of you who don't know, the Portland Business Alliance is kind of like the Chamber of Commerce for the city of Portland. So they represent a lot of the businesses downtown. You will be unsurprised to hear that the businesses downtown care an awful lot about keeping downtown clean and safe. So one of the things that they've have done, Clean and Safe is a nonprofit group. The nonprofit group contracts with Portland Business Alliance to run that program. The people you see actually out there on the streets are actually, a lot of them are formerly homeless themselves or recently out of prison. So it gives them, like that graffiti cleanup work, the trash work, gives those folks a paycheck and meaningful work. And the Portland Business Alliance is the contractor that kind of manages all of that. I think they have essentially 2 or 3 people in admin. They also do a lot of really important work pulling businesses together just to keep each other safe. One of the challenges downtown right now, and I hear about this an awful lot in my role at 911 and on council, is just the problem with violence in our downtown streets. So Mark Wells in particular, those of you who might have been part of some of the city of Portland's crime prevention programs back in the day, Mark is over there helping kind of organize community outreach around public safety stuff.
Okay. Up the next one, please comment on the reported delayed 911 responses.
Yes, important issue one, which is close to my heart and occupies a lot of my brain. There are 2 things to know about 911, or the Bureau of Emergency Communications. First, we're the Bureau of Emergency Communications, which means we're the folks who pick up your 911 calls. You might also know that Portland has a non-emergency number, the number that you call if you have, let's say your bike got stolen and you need to file a police report, or even your car got stolen the night before and you need to file a police report. Our 911 operators answer both lines, the 911 line and the non-emergency line. And to put it into perspective, we get 500,000 911 calls a year, and we get 500,000 non-emergency calls. And I spent last Friday afternoon kind of shadowing one of my 911 operators to get a sense of how it's going. I'll tell you a couple of things. Number one, we're the Bureau of Emergency Communications, so our priority is those 911 calls, and those are life and death issues. When you hear reports of cops responding to 12 shootings in 24 hours, the very first responder there, or it's my team who picks up those calls. So we've just got to get to those. And even those, it's 500,000 calls a year. That's an awful lot. What then happens is, frankly, our non-emergency calls get neglected. It's my goal here. Our goal is to pick up our 911 calls in the first, I think, 9 seconds of you calling in. We don't always meet that goal, but that's what we're striving for. On the other hand, that means that if you're on the non-emergency line, you have to wait an awful long time. That's a problem. And the root of that problem came down to a policy decision that the city made a long time ago, and this was a bad choice. They put that non-emergency line in the Bureau of Emergency Communications, and that's not an appropriate place for that responsibility. It's an important role, but it's not something my 911 callers should take. So we, and people and the mayor, and I think everyone else on council agrees with me on that. So part of our work now is to migrate non-emergency to a new service. So we're going to take the calls that are currently coming into the non-emergency line and migrate it over to 311, which is like an information service line that the city operates. Traditionally, that's been kind of a sleepy shop, but now they have agreed to take over these calls, and they are ramping up in order to do that. I hope to be able to transfer by next summer. I hope to be able to transfer about 138,000 of the non-emergency calls that we're currently taking over to 311, which will just be a revolution in terms of service. In the short term, though, that's where I hope to be next summer. I think we can also make some improvements by introducing some software, some artificial intelligence software that will help us with taking the non-emergency calls. So in the very near future, as in I'm hopeful we'll have this done by January. When you call non-emergency, your first interaction will actually be with we're calling it a virtual police officer. It's a robot, but it's a very, very smart robot who can talk to you. They'll basically ask you what your issue is, and they'll help you navigate to where you need to be. That's exciting. And there'll also be a web portal that comes with this. So, you know, if it'll suddenly be much easier for you to go online and file your and get the services you need through the web instead of waiting online for someone to pick up on non-emergency. And I will tell you, there are times in the day when our non-emergency line is non-functional. I was there Friday afternoon, and I think our non-emergency call waits were about 45 minutes. There are times when our non-emergency wait times can be 4 hours. And you may even have the experience of calling non-emergency, and actually what it feels like is it feels like you call and you get hung up on. What is actually happening there is on a non-emergency, we only have 27 lines that we can basically have people on hold for. And if you're the 28th caller, it functionally hangs up on you. We'll be able to solve all of that once we bring in the new artificial intelligence software. And after that, you know, we'll have that done basically by the end of this calendar year. By next summer, we'll actually have the good folks over at 311 picking up your non-emergency calls too. So the service there will get much better, much quicker. And in the meantime, also, I'm training up my 911 operators. So we have some trainees who are going to come online. But, you know, I also want folks to know that that's a really highly skilled job. You might think of it as a call room type of job, but those folks are much more akin to air traffic controllers. So they're taking every call is an emergency. They're taking in real information about an emergency. They're taking a look at the assets that we have out there and trying to connect a person in need with the fire truck, the police car, the ambulance that you need. It takes us 18 months to get someone trained up for that. So it's very serious work. And I'd like to say that they're our first responders because they truly are.
Great, thank you so much for that answer. Sandy asked the question, what is the city doing about graffiti on traffic signs, which makes it difficult for drivers, especially those who are new to Portland?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. I don't know specifically about traffic signs, but I do know that we have invested, I think, about $3.4 million in graffiti. Yeah, we have invested $3.4 million in a graffiti removal program. So we're going big on getting graffiti off of our buildings and especially our traffic signs. If you see something dangerous, you might even want PBOT should have a budget for that. So if you see a sign that has been defaced to the point where it's non-usable, you should please reach out and let the city know about that because we can send a PBOT crew out to fix that right away.
Thank you. Betty asks, is the city doing anything to work with Bybee Lakes Hope Center?
In fact, that's one of Homer Williams's project. I just met with Homer on Friday. We don't have any dollars invested there, although I do completely support the program. I think they're doing great work. There are ways to expand that concept in terms of opening up new facilities. Today I've kind of talked about the things that the city is doing. Bybee Lakes is largely a nonprofit / profit no one's making money there, but business communities and other folks care about that a lot. So we're working with them and seeing where we can partner to expand that. I would say that despite the years of controversy over that, it's been a roaring success so far.
Okay, let's see. Ginny says, affordable housing is a key to any solution, but prices and availability seem to be going in the wrong direction. How can the city can the city do anything about the pieces of the puzzle? If so, what?
Sure, great question. First, I'll say that Commissioner Dan Ryan both has a housing bureau and the joint office, so he's sort of our housing czar. The good news there is Dan is a great friend of mine and a real visionary in this area.
I just was, wait.
A real visionary in this area. And he's doing several really important things. He is making probably nearly every week he comes to council with a new affordable housing project. that's sponsored by the city. So we either invest in the land or we partner with the developers to bring these online. So we have literally at this point, thousands of new units of affordable housing coming online. One of the challenges there is that, you know, housing takes an awful long time to build, so it's slow. But there's even better news on that. And here I can talk about a project that Commissioner Ryan and I are partnering in. One of the reasons why housing is so unaffordable in Portland is that it's really difficult to build in Portland. I'm sure some of you have needed to pull a permit from the city of Portland for you know, one of your businesses, or to even just make a change to your home. And it's a nightmarish process. So Commissioner Ryan and I have come together in the past 2 months and set the goal of reducing the amount of time it takes people to get their permits by 30%. So we've called together all the permitting offices in the city and essentially locked them in the room for the past 10 months or so, and given them the directive to tell us how we can go about making this process work more smoothly and quicker. I think we're going to get to our 30% goal, at least for some programs. And so for some programs, it might be more difficult, but I can tell you for my bureaus, we will cut the amount of time it takes to get your water permit, your environmental services permit by 30%. I think we can get there for most offices too. We've also heard that the city's website for permitting is far too complex, and we need to simplify that. And the processes in terms of just submitting your permits are far too complicated. So we're cutting red tape and trying to make all that go much more smoothly. And if we can do that, it will make a big difference in the costs it takes to build in Portland. You know, you probably a couple of weeks ago, I think we saw one of the local papers had a story about someone trying to build, I think, affordable housing in Portland. And it took them 2 years to navigate the permits process. And I can tell you, I can't give you the details, but I'm certainly talking to some private sector folks who want to build a major project in the city. It will be $1 billion project if we can pull it off. And they want to be in Portland, you know, because Portland's a very desirable place. On the other hand, they're afraid to build in Portland because of two things, both the livability stuff and the permit stuff. You know, if your project, if you want to get something done in 2 or 3 years and it's going to take 4 to 6 by the time you navigate city bureaucracy, you might decide that, you know, this is not where you want to build your new facility. And we got to change that dynamic. And that is exactly the dynamic that is holding back Portland's recovery at this point.
Great. Glennis, we're drawing close to the end of our hour, so, and we have still a couple more questions in chat.
Well,
I need to go quicker.
well, let's do the 2 chats, and then we'll probably have to end the session.
Okay, I'll just mention that Yvette from the Commissioner's Office did post in chat the website, where a link to the website where you can report graffiti to the Office of Community and Civic Life. So if you're able to look at chat, you can get to the link there. So Gwen asked, how do we find out how are the homeless, who are the homeless, and so we can treat them as individuals?
That's a great question, and I think a great intervention and a classic Portland instinct. You know, one of the things I love about the city is that Portlanders are kind and connected. One of the things that I would recommend you doing is reaching out to one of your local nonprofits that serves the houseless community. You know, folks who maybe do soup kitchens or operate a shelter, and look for opportunities to spend a couple hours a month volunteering there. It will really give you a unique perspective on who these folks are. I've had the privilege of serving in that role. And, you know, one of the things I've discovered, a lot of the houseless folks are kind of new to Portland, but a lot of these folks who, you know, I used to work out in Park Rose, and a lot of the people sleeping in the slough, you know, are out there because that's where they went to Park Rose High School. They don't have a home, but Park Rose is still their home.
Glennis?
I was just going to say, do we have time? We have time for one more question.
Sure, let's take that one.
what, there are two actually questions in chat. Which one? One is about join, Join, and the other is about deployment of Portland Street Response, money, personnel, so forth.
Sure. Let me take both. Join are important partners with the city of Portland. We have many contracts with them, certainly indispensable. I met with the ED of Join, I'm sure within the last 2 weeks or so to talk about her concerns. So we're working closely with them. And then I think you have a question about the status of Portland Street Response and why it's taking so long to roll out. It's taking first, the reason why it's taking long to roll out is not because of political opposition or pushback. You know, you should think of Portland Street Response as a new service, a new arm of our first responder system. You know, and starting basically now, we have fire, we have police, we have ambulance, and then we have Portland Street Response. We'll be kind of our outreach workers for folks who are houseless or going through some mental health services. And frankly, it's a more complex problem than people think. You know, there are, you know, the Portland Street Response has been in, we've piloted it out in Lentz. It's been in evolution ever since. All sorts of policy questions. You know, we started where we only served people who were living on the streets. But since we started taking calls, one of the things that we discovered is, you know, we're getting calls from people who are going through mental health crises who are actually inside. Do we send them inside? That wasn't part of the original vision. One of the other reasons why and this might go directly to the question, the original rollout plan for Portland Street Response is that because this is so important, it's like standing up the new fire department in many ways, and certainly like the police department too, it's just a rich and complex thing. We have an evaluation that's built into it. So the plan is after 6 months, we do an evaluation of the program. And then after 1 year, we do an evaluation of the program. 2 weeks ago, we did the 6-month evaluation where we got feedback on what was working and what wasn't working. I can tell you the program is working pretty well. All sorts of questions still need to be figured out in terms of, you know, do they respond to situations where people might have weapons? Do they deal with people who are suicidal? How do you if we want Portland Street Response and the police department to respond to the same call, like how does that procedure go? There's just a lot of program development stuff that needs to be figured out. You know, we probably have, officially we have 4,000 folks sleeping on the street every night. It's probably much closer to 8 or 16,000. So this is a really heavy lift that you really need to get right because it is truly a matter of life and death. But I can tell you, we've learned a lot. Everyone's really on this one going full steam ahead. But we're also, at least I'm deeply committed to getting this right. And I'll tell you why I'm committed to getting this right, because if we get this wrong, we will lose the opportunity to provide this kind of service for, you know, another 10 years or so. If we spend all these dollars and it doesn't make a dent, or if we frankly get one of our Portland Street Response staff killed, it will be awfully hard to move forward with this. But let me tell you, this is also kind of what the future looks like. I think, and this might be a good closing theme is, you know, I think one of the reasons why Portland is struggling now is that we have outgrown the tools that the city uses to maintain itself. You know, we used to have a sobering center, and that sobering center closed down not that long ago. And the reason why the sobering center closed down is not because we ran out of people who needed to get sober, but they were set up in the 1970s, if I believe right, basically anticipating, you know, clients who were drunk. But today, the folks who need our sobering services are probably on meth or fentanyl. And the folks who worked in the sobering center said, we are not prepared for this. And so one of the things the city really needs to do right now is to invent a new generation of services for the challenges that we face today. That's awfully hard work. If you're frustrated right now and disappointed right now, I think this awkward moment is kind of Portland's awkward adolescence. We were an awfully small, charming town for a long time. We are a larger town. I think we're still charming, but one of the things that we still need to do is to figure out the tools we need in order to prosper in the 21st century.
Well, thank you. It's my mute on, I hope.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. Well, you can see from the questions that people are really concerned about our city.
Yeah.
And it's been very helpful to hear you tell us some of the things that are being done. So thank you very much. And we can hope we can talk to you again, because I think we've all learned a lot.
Well, I want to thank all of you for turning out. What an amazing turnout today. Really sharp questions. I want to thank each and every one of you for sticking with Portland. I know it's not always easy, and it won't be easy moving forward, but I also want you to maintain hope. I really see Portland turning a corner here and getting better. And I think that if we do it the Portland way, which is all of us to pull together and to take care of each other, we'll build a city that we can all be proud of and be proud to leave to our children. And I also hope that you will please invite me back sometime soon. I'd love to give you an update on what the next 10 months of my time in office looks like.
Well, I heard you say that, so we'll be in touch.
Excellent. Great. Hold me to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yvette, thank you very much for your help.
And thank
Yes,
you for inviting Mirabella to join.
Oh, of course. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.